Welcome to another episode of the podcast. I'm here today with a local Utah legend, Tom Welch. This is a true honor for me, Tom, so thank you for spending some time with us here.
I don't know about the introduction, but it's good to have you here.
It's great to be here. Tom is you're now the chairman of the board and you've past president, CEO of Maverik. So if you live anywhere in Utah, you've clearly driven by, probably today as you're listening to this, you've probably passed 8 or 9 Mavericks, but he is a legend in growing businesses. We'll get back into that a little bit. But one thing I read about you is you're a visionary. You see things that people can't see that are 15, 20 years down the line. And the thing that stood out to me is you've not only had the vision for the Olympics to be here, but you also have talked recently quite a bit about bringing an NFL team to Utah. Did that ever go anywhere? Did you get any leverage on that?
You know, there's always tomorrow. Right now I've been trying to sell a little gas. But, when you talk about football, you talk about the growth of Utah and the Salt Lake Valley, we ought to have a football team. You know, look at the cities that we compete with for new business. Seattle, Denver, Phoenix. What are those 3 cities? 3 major cities we compete with. What do they have that we don't?
NFL, Major League Baseball.
They don't. Yeah. That's right.
Yeah.
And the thing about football, people say, well, do you have enough people in the valley to support football? They said, the members of the Mormon church, you're not going to get them to come out. And I said, well, right now in the valley, the population, the LDS is maybe 45%. Mm-hmm. And even of that 45%, half of us would go to a football game.
Yeah.
I can remember when I was with President Hinckley one time. We were talking about the Olympics, and I was trying to figure a way to build a opening ceremony stadium that we could then convert to a football. He looked at me and he said, Tom, I don't know that I feel good about my priesthood brother going to football on Sunday. And I said, President, it's not your brother that I'm concerned about. It's a guy that stays home, drinks beer, watches football all weekend. I want to get him out in the fresh air so he's not beating his kids. And he laughed. But the 26 top sports from a financial standpoint, profitability in the world, that takes all the big soccer stadiums, everything. 22 of those are football in the United States, and it's the television contract. You make money before you open. So football isn't for everyone, but in my house it's pretty big.
Well, I know that I can speak for most of my friends. If we had a team, we would all be there on Sundays and watch it and support it. So, no, that's great. Well, and backing up, you've been a president CEO of Maverik. You were the head of the Salt Lake Olympic Bid Committee, the president of that, and also a huge executive over at Smith's. When you started at Smith's, they had 5 stores. By the time you left, they were up to 300. You took them to the New York Stock Exchange. What did business look like when you were a kid, though? What did you do for jobs before you started building these business empires?
I started at 16 delivering prescriptions for a local pharmacy. I worked my way through college at the railroad. I went into the Coast Guard 3 days after I graduated from high school. So I learned a lot about physical work early on. I love this valley. I came home after serving an LDS mission and went to Weber State College, and I got a lot of grief. I grew up in Ogden. Mm-hmm. Ogden we called ourselves Hub City. And it was only because we had the railroad there that we were Hub City. And I went to Weber State, and I got involved. I was student body president there, and it wasn't until I left and went to law school back east at George Washington that I really realized how special we are, how good our educational institutions are here. I can remember going into the start of school, and 70% of our class were Ivy League kids from Ivy League schools, you know, what was I doing? I was working on the railroad, and to pay for my schooling, and I was back there, and you know, we talked about what we did, and I said, yeah, I switched cars on a railroad. They looked at me because they'd been in the kibbutzes in Israel or traveling to Europe, and I went to the first day of class, and I watched these guys stand up and talk, and I didn't even know what they were talking about. And it wasn't until the end of the first semester, because they posted grades, you know, and I saw all these guys that all semester long just impressed me with what they were saying, only because I didn't know what they were saying. And then when they posted grades and I looked and I had done pretty well, and some of those guys were considerably below me, I said, you know, no wonder they didn't know what they were talking about either. But when I came back to join Smith's, I turned down a big job in New York with a big law firm there, but I wanted to come home. And the thing that I had learned while being away is that, you know, our educational institutions are every bit as good as theirs. The only thing is we sometimes don't realize it and don't know it. And I thought, you know, we had a great city here. But when we started the Olympic bid process, the members of the United States Committee laughed at us. They said, you think you could bring the world-class event to Salt Lake City? Well, you know, we showed them that we could.
Right.
And this is a great place to live. I think our challenge is to continue to provide opportunities for our young people to have good paying jobs, to support their families, to not have to have an exodus outside the state. And that's what I think our challenge should be as we go forward.
Well, one thing that stood out to me in your history is in 1985 is when Utah started trying to get the bid. Then 1989 is when they recruited you.
No, I was 85.
85.
I started.
You started it. Okay.
But when I started it was kind of a funny story. I got a call from the governor's office, and it was on my Rotary Day.
Okay.
And I got in the Salt Lake Rotary Club only because I had been in the Ogden Rotary Club before, and I moved down, so they had to make a place for me. And I was a really young guy there, and I wanted to attend all my meetings. And they called and asked me if I could meet with the governor and with Ted Wilson, who was mayor. Well, Norm Baker's a governor, a Republican. Ted's a Democrat. And I said, what do those guys have in common they want to talk to me about? And I walked into the Alda Club to meet him, and Fred Ball, who was the past president of the chamber, was there. He looked up, he said, Tom, he said, what are you doing with the next 10 years of your life? We all laughed, and if I had any idea, I would have turned around and got out of there so fast. But, you know, they had realized that if they were going to put a bid forward, and they were talking about it would have been 98, 2002, putting an international bid, they had to have a bid before the United States Olympic Committee in the next 30 days. And so they just said, we need help. Well, I thought, you know, for 30 days I could do anything. And we put together the bid, went back, presented it, and we just got our tails kicked. We were beat by Anchorage, Alaska. What was so hard for me, I'd been, after high school, on a Mormon mission in Anchorage, Alaska. And I knew what they had. And they could no more ever host the Olympic Games, and yet they beat us. So we went to work, and, you know, it started from there. And
well, you ended up spending the next 10 years.
I spent 12 years.
12 years total.
Yeah.
Putting together the bids and everything else. Why did you decide then? Was it just your love for the state of Utah, just wanting to show the world what we have here, or what was the reason you?
Don't you see the big S on my forehead that says stupid? You know, no, why? And would I have done it if I'd looked at it on the front end? Probably. because I believed it was a stepping stone to a lot of things, and it was.
Well, it was. You've helped build out the entire community,
The
really.
whole-
I mean,
the
the
whole
infrastructure,
infrastructure.
everything that happened was very much the city, and you started getting some recognition for this recently, which
And the federal dollars too,
100%.
I was driving down last week to watch one of my grandsons play baseball in Provo, and I was going along and bumper to bumper all the way to Provo. The game was at 5 o'clock, and I just thought of, we need the Olympics again, because it was really the infrastructure dollars that we got, federal help that let us widen the highways all the way up the canyons into Park City, down, and the way our population is growing. What is the greatest challenge I see? Infrastructure. We need to find a way to pay for the infrastructure, and somebody smarter than I is going to have to figure that out.
Well, the Olympics really were that, that boost that the economy needed here in Utah to kind of really put us on that global map. You ended up working tirelessly for 12 years, and then there was kind of a little bit of controversy. You were later cleared from.
You think? Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that experience when you found out, when you got indicted for a couple charges, basically bribery charges and things like that.
Corruption,
But you were cleared on all accounts. But when you found out that day, walk us through a little bit of kind of your feelings, and then once you found out that you were cleared of all charges, the feeling about that.
I wrote my thoughts up in this process because I knew, someday if I was put away for 65 years, because that's what they charge us for. I think of this. I could have gone and shot somebody on Main Street and they would have put me away for 65 years. But I wrote my thoughts, and one of the thoughts that I remember was it was just before they were going to charge us, and I knew they were going to charge us. And we were up fishing in Alaska, and I was standing out in the middle of this river fishing, knowing that when I came back I was going to be charged on this counts, and a bear came walking down the river by the side, and he looked down at me, and was figuring, would he be good for lunch or not? I guess, but I was, at that moment, I felt like I was so alone, and I wrote my thoughts down, and I entitled them "Standing Alone," and that was a lonely time, because when you have to face the federal government, I'm a lawyer, but the might and the strength and the power that they bring, and you have to defend yourself. It's tough, and yet if I had to say anything, people say we're really tough doing that and going through that. But when I wrote my comments, I concluded them by saying, I never felt like I was standing alone, because throughout that 10 years, we were an open book. Everybody in the city knew the kind of things that you do when you're bidding for the games, and we were an open book on that. There wasn't anything that we didn't publicly talk about.
Right.
It wasn't anything that a whole lot different than my church does. We brought kids in from Africa and put them in school here. Why? Because we brought IOC members in here and took them around, and from members from Africa. And after 3 days, they said, "Tom, you're a really nice guy, but don't you have any black people here?" And our population was really skewered, and there was nothing better than getting a kid in school that wrote home and said, "This is the kind of people they are." And they do that at BYU today with sons and daughters of the ambassadors, and it's a great process.
Absolutely. Well, I just can imagine the relief when you got cleared of that. But the games had passed by then, and there was kind of I don't know how you've talked about that you have no resentment or bitterness towards it, but was it a little bit tough to watch the games because they excelled, and you were the head of bringing them to Salt Lake City. I mean, that was your baby. Was it difficult to watch the games excel here, knowing that you couldn't fully enjoy it?
No, I think I fully enjoyed it.
Oh, good.
And you know, throughout this whole process, people, strangers on the street would stop me and say, "Hey, we're with you." And for years there, I never bought my own meal in a restaurant. Somebody at another table. So you know, I felt good, and I was really proud of the Olympics. I'm proud of the people of Utah. And it was a real, you know, it was a real sense of satisfaction through that process.
Yeah, well, I think it's been heralded as one of the greatest Olympic Games that was ever held. And so I just think that's kind of, to be able to leave that kind of a legacy, what a neat opportunity. But you've not just had that experience in your life. I mean, going back to the days when you were at Smith's and you guys built that from 5 stores to 300, knowing nowadays, if you were at Smith's right now with Amazon and they just had their whole thing where they acquired Whole Foods, what would you do if you were running Smith's today, what would you do to combat, I guess, against Amazon?
You know, you have a monster in your backyard. I'd paint it green. I don't know. I think that the grocery industry is an industry that's personal in nature. You know, I want to buy my own carrots. I want to pick out a head of lettuce with a steak that I'm going to barbecue. And I think as long as retailers will be able to compete, as long as they realize and treat people with respect, they then have respect for the company that they're working for. Mm-hmm. The human relationship, I think, is integral in any venture if it's going to be successful. When I was at Smith's, I can remember D. Smith had a sign on his wall that said, "You can get anything you want in life if you help enough other people get what they want." Well, I tried that with the Olympics and it got me in trouble, but I believe in that philosophy. And you know, nothing makes me happier than when I get a phone call from somebody and it's been one of our stores and the store manager tells them that, you know, they ask, "Well, do you like working here?" He says, "I love my job." Mm-hmm. Or she says, "I love my job." That makes me happy because I know if they love their job, they're loving the customer, they're taking care of them, and that's how you build business.
Well, and how do you, because you did create that culture at Smith's, and it's very prominent in the Maverick now. I go to Maverick, I always know I'm going to get a good experience from the cashier. How do you build that kind of a culture within a company when it's that large and that many people?
It has to be permeate throughout the organization. You know, we don't, and none of the companies I've ever been at tolerate discrimination, degradation, demeaning of anyone, of customer, of employees. And if you have somebody in supervision that doesn't respect those people that work for them, they don't end up working for us very long.
I think that makes a lot of sense. Well, and as you kind of took on more of the role of president of Maverick, you guys are over 300. How many total convenience stores?
I think we're about 318 today. We'll open another one in Colorado this week, so we'll be on our way. We should hit 345 stores by the end of the year.
And how has the convenience store changed from when you first got in over 20 years ago on the board of Maverick to today? Because it's such a different experience going to a Maverick convenience store as it was going to the gas station when I was a little kid, for example.
We were the country store. When you were a kid, when I was a kid, it was Maverick's country store experience. And, that store was probably 2,000 feet. Our stores today are probably 4,500, $5,000, and back then you could buy a Bahama Mama. You know, today you can buy it wrapped and a lot of other things. We have our, you know, we do our own cooking, our own grill right there for people. But I think we're a food store that sells gas. And I think at that time we were a gas station that had bubblegum. And, you know, we have evolved with the times. We really believe that we're adventure's first stop. You come in the office, you see it, guys are wearing shorts. When I became president, it was the first time you could wear jeans. And that was the second day I came to work. We changed the policy. And, you know, if you're going to be adventure's first stop, if you want people to have an adventure and an experience, you want to lift the spirits, everybody's got to be involved. And you got to be involved all the way.
So what is the manager, you know, or the person that's at the top of the company, how do you find the types of people, or what do you do that maybe people aren't seeing behind the scenes that, you know, to find so many great people to work in such a large organization?
You know, it helps. You heard that saying, a rising ship, a rising tide lifts all ships.
Sure.
Well, you know, Mavericks, today we're a growing company. We open 20, 25 stores. We're in 11 states. And it's, you know, we're doing things that other people aren't doing in their convenience stores. We don't think we're a convenience store. We think we're a food store. We think that we just sell a little gas on the side, about 2 million gallons a day or something like that.
Is that what you sell a day of gas?
We're over that.
That's amazing. Well, I know you've personally contributed very heavily to my addiction to rock stars. You always got your 2 for $3, and so it is funny though. I was telling some friends I was coming to do this interview, and one of them said, you know, I'll drive by 3 or 4 other gas stations to get to a Maverick just because I know what kind of experience I'm going to have there. And so hearing something like that, does that permeate through the organization? Do people know what kind of things are going on?
We have a lot of pride. You know, we were just 2 weeks ago, I think, selected as having the cleanest restrooms in the state. Well, you know, when I became president, what was my number one priority? Our restrooms. You know, if we don't have clean restrooms, you sure don't want to buy food there. and your wives certainly don't want to bring their kids in and have food there.
Yeah, I've been guilty of taking a donut or a Bahama Mama into the bathroom with me once or twice at the Maverick.
We find crumbs in there. I wonder who did that.
Oh, that's great. Well, when you came back to Utah, you had a lot of other opportunities and things like that. Did you foresee the community becoming what it has, and what kind of challenges do you see going forward for the state of Utah here specifically?
I think we got to provide the same opportunities that hopefully that I had, and that for our kids and for our kids' kids, and that means that we need to evolve. We're doing a great job out in our Silicon Slopes out here. You know, I try to build stores before the people come. In the Olympics, we said, you know, if you build them, they'll come. Well, that's what we try to do with our stations. We try to build them before the people get there. Well, we've got to build a lot of stores between Plain, far west, up in Ogden, all the way along, because there's going to be people fill in this valley. And people require services. They require goods. They require places to live. All of these are things that generate a healthy economy. And so I'm really bullish on our future. I think that, but I think it's going to be very different. You know, I lived in California for a time, and lived in Washington, and knew what urban life was like. Well, we're starting to see it as we drive from here to Provo, bumper to bumper. And one of the great challenges I think we face is building an infrastructure that is going to support the population base and that we still have a quality of life. But it'll be different.
Do you see any problems with, because you had the advantage, you came from a work ethic, you came from, you had a tough job starting at age 16, you were running prescriptions and things like that. Do you feel like the opportunities are there for young people to get that same work ethic that you had, or do you feel like they're at an advantage or disadvantage in this day and age as you hire employees in the younger generation?
I think the challenges are different. I think the challenges for you, not for me so much, but for you or how are we going to evolve? Because I see in the next 15 years, technology is going to take a lot of jobs. Even if you're a doctor, a surgeon up at the university, there's going to be a lot of that assumed by machines that can do it better and more technical. And I think that as our population grows, we need to broaden our skills, keep up to date with our education. And I think anybody who is young today needs to realize they'll probably have to reinvent themselves 2 or 3 times through life. And we're going to have more leisure time and more people will be living in apartments that are living in homes because homes will become more expensive. And we may make the same amount of money, but we may work 30 hours rather than 55 hours or 60 hours like we're working today. So I think education is critical. I think people are going to have to retrain themselves, whatever field they're in. And so we need to embrace learning, embrace education, and not be afraid of it.
No, I think that's well said. I think more than ever, you kind of pick a career nowadays, but you have to be open to the idea that it's going to be evolving always, even as a real estate agent. It's going to evolve with tech over the next 5 to 10 years. My job will probably change. It'll probably still be a relevant job, but at the same time, it's going to be much different than maybe what it looked like when I started.
15 years from now, even doing podcasts, I might be sitting here talking to a machine that you programmed before you went to your second or third job.
That's very true. And they'll know exactly, they'll have the avatar of what you are. They'll know more information about you than I ever could have researched in a couple hours.
I'm just going to give you a DVD to play.
We'll probably be talking to your hologram or something like that, right?
Yeah.
No, I think that's great. But what kind of stuff you've worked for so long and built these companies up. What do you like to do when you're not working? What does life as Tom Welch look like?
You see those mountains out there? I love being in them. I grew up, it's funny, today I was reading a little bit of a history that my dad wrote and talked about when he'd take me on his shoulders out on the stream fishing or up in the mountains hunting. And that was a really important part of his life. And I'm trying to make that an important part of my life with my kids as they come along. Now as grandkids come, I really work on it.
Yeah, sure. How do you find the balance? Because you're still working hard. You've been, in the workforce for 40 years now.
You're being kind.
How do you find the balance? Because I think it's something that a lot of people struggle with. CEOs or people starting their own business, and you manage such large companies or organizations. How do you find that life balance, or is there any life hacks or things that you have done to be successful in that aspect?
Maybe it's a blessing, maybe it's a curse, but I love people, I love interaction. When I get off work, I'm watching my grandkids play baseball now, and it was just like when I was playing. And so, I think you gotta have interests. I think there are things, people who are able to have passion in their life, whether it's the arts, whether it's sports, whether it's nature, whether it's working out. Too bad for some of us it's eating. That you really want to find joy in life. And if I've been blessed with anything, it's the ability to find that and enjoy. And so, my days are long, and I go to bed when I'm tired, but I get up and I'm ready for the next day, and I find a lot of happiness. But I find my happiness generally with people.
No, I think it's such a good answer. And I always say, especially with parents, your kids, as much as anything else, they want to see their parents happy. And so if you can go out and have passions and do things that light you up, your kids are going to want to respond to that, and they're going to want to be a part of that as well. So I like that, I think that's an important part of being an adult, is keeping your passions and finding the things that really light you up.
I think that's a great rule of life.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. Well, how do you want your kids and grandkids to remember you? If you were to sit in on a conversation, they were talking to a stranger about Tom, what would you want them to say about Dad or Grandpa?
I think somebody gave me a plaque once. I have hanging, it was during the Olympics, and one of the things looked bleak, and it said, it was a quote I gave from a talk earlier where I said, I didn't say it would be easy. I said it would be worthwhile. And I don't care what it is in life, that probably rings true. If it's worthwhile, it's probably hard. And it requires effort, it requires investment, whether that's in relationships with people, whether it's in building a better widget. A life isn't meant to be easy. But if you can enjoy the challenge and the journey along the way, then it's what is it? Somebody said once, your life is determined by your perspective. And I every once in a while I'll look to one of my friends who's having a tough day, and I say, well, how is it to be you? And we all have those days, but even the challenges, are rewarding if you look at them that way.
Yeah, I think if you can find the joy in the challenge, right, a joy in a little bit of the suffering, it really opens the door to experience a different type of fulfillment in your entire life.
I think you're right.
I think that's great. What do you do to stay sharp? I mean, I know that you went to law school, you went to George Washington. You've kept, obviously, learning management and stayed on top of your game. Is there anything that you do, or our listeners, people that are maybe new CEOs or managers that want to learn to build kind of what you have been able to do? Is there anything what kind of stuff do you do to stay sharp?
Well, I read a lot. But I observe more.
What do you look for when you're observing?
I look at people. I look at how do they react to things. You can tell a lot about people really quickly. If they're enjoying the journey, then they're doing the right things. If life's hard, they need to look at other people who really have hard lives, and then they'll realize, they're in a pretty good situation. And most of us live here, nobody's exempt. Everyone has hardships and challenges and heartbreaks in life. But if you get up the next day and you get past them, you're going to have a successful life.
I keep a picture of the boats at Utah Beach and Omaha Beach during D-Day above my office desk, because if I'm ever having a bad day, I have to remind myself, this is not a bad day. This is, it's good to have that comparison and to be able to really understand what a bad day actually looks like.
That's right.
No, that's great. Well, what is next for you? Are you guys, do you have your goals for Maverick? Are you planning to continue on this journey for a while, or what's next in the life of Tom Welch?
I got to get in tomorrow and see what's coming. There are a lot of interests that I have, and I say maybe not tomorrow, but maybe the next day I'll pursue them. But I feel just as maybe not quite as young, because I've learned a lot of lessons along the way. But I'm just as excited about life as I ever was.
Yeah, you have a smile. Other people have told me this about you as well, but you just have a smile. You permeate a great positive energy. For somebody that maybe doesn't feel that happiness in their lives, what advice do you have? Because it really does come through. Just talking with you right now, I just feel just a happiness towards life in general.
You know, if you can find joy in people around you, you can be happy. If you're looking at just the dark side of life, you better get a cat and kick it on the way in. Because when you go home, you better find happiness in that home. And it's true with the workplace. There are a lot of opportunities out there if you're unhappy to find something that makes you happy. But you know, your position in life is determined by your attitude. So you need to ask yourself, what's my attitude?
I think that's great. I had a couple of days ago, I was bugged with a couple different groups of people in my life, and I realized if I'm bugged with these different people that I'm always getting along with, I was like, I need to change my attitude. I must be having a problem right now. And so I really took a moment to go through what I'm grateful for and try to change my own attitude, because rather than projecting that everybody else is being kind of cruddy in the moment, I realized I must be.
I thought you were a little glum when you walked in, and I'm glad to see it's rubbing off on you.
Yeah, you're already taking a definite effect on me here, but no, Tom, this is such a pleasure. I just respect what you did for the city. You really are a legend here in Utah, and everybody that lives here should give you a huge vote of thanks for the infrastructure and the opportunities that have been brought to this area because of your work. And I mean, you took on a role that, looking back, I don't know if you ever knew exactly how much difficulty was going to come with it, but the reward that we all get to benefit from now, I think, is something that we can all appreciate. So on behalf of me and our listeners, it's just a thanks, and it's fun to watch what you guys are doing with Maverick and everything else you do.
Well, thanks for coming by and stop by often.
Yeah, I'll keep stopping in at my daily Maverick run. It's at least once a day. I also have a little bit of a sweets issue, so
when you go in there, tell them Tom sent you.
I will. I'll let them take good care of me.
Okay.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you.